Welcome to Journeys of Empowerment. I'm your host, Michiel Sujit Rijt. This podcast brings you deep, heartfelt conversations with changemakers, thought leaders, and pioneers of empowerment, uncovering insights and strategies that fuel personal and collective transformation. I had the pleasure of speaking with Magdalena Szumna, founder of Indigo Diversity Consulting. Magdalena's journey from corporate burnout to bold advocate for intercultural empathy is a powerful reminder that burnout isn't always a breakdown. It can be a breakthrough. We explore how moments of crisis can realign us with purpose, the importance of psychological safety for thriving teams, and why true diversity work always begins within. Magdalena's story invites us to speak our truth, our own stories, and create real impact from the inside out. If you're seeking a fresh perspective on belonging, leadership, and inner growth, this conversation will stay with you. Before we dive in, a quick shout out to our sponsor Neotopia, helping leaders turn behavior change into lasting impact. Leading a team through change isn't easy. Resistance, disengagement, old habits, they are more common than you might think. But real change doesn't happen by chance. It takes a proven approach, and that's exactly what Neotopia offers. It all starts with the awareness session, a powerful workshop where you discover why behavior change fails and how to fix it. A structured approach to making change stick, and how to lead teams who take ownership, not just follow orders. Curious to experience it yourself? Visit neotopia.nl to learn more. And now over to our conversation. So here we go, and we're live in the studio. Thank you for being here, Magdalena.
Thank you for having me.
And we were just a little bit laughing because we are going to start with a question, and the question is, can you introduce yourself and let us know who you are? Introduce who you are.
Oh my gosh, that's a big question and an open question. And I get a sense you are not only asking about my professional life. So.
That's very good, very good. That was already a little in the intro, so this is really about you.
Thank you. Well, it's actually a very interesting question, I think, for us to ponder. I feel like I'm a little bit of a different person every day, or someone else every day, in a sense that you grow and learn and you evolve. So who am I today? On this beautiful spring day. We are recording it on the first or second day of spring, right?
The 20th starts, eh? It's the second day.
Second day of spring. I'm a very, very happy, podcast guest today. Here to share a little bit more about my journey and what brought me to this seat. Actually, was an interest in getting to know you a little bit more, and also being able to share about my work and my life. I'm a woman. I am Polish by origin. I have grown up in Poland, in Warsaw, and moved to the Netherlands over a decade ago. So if that shapes a little bit already the story, that's the introduction. What I do in my daily life, as your introduction already said, is I'm a trainer and facilitator, but also a seasoned business professional. I've worked for nearly 2 decades in corporates, big international organizations, which we probably will dive into later, I imagine.
We will.
On the private side, I'm a dog mom of Bodhi. Bodhi, who is my dog child and also my therapist, my best friend. He helped me through one of the toughest times in my life. He is my partner in crime at Indigo as well. I call him my chief woofing officer. So he has an official role.
All right, and as a shareholder also.
He is, absolutely. I mean, he better be.
An actor's one.
I would say, his well-being also depends on how well we do.
Oh.
From that perspective, he is. But he is a very important element of that operation, absolutely.
And
so, yeah.
is he in the day-to-day also when you're working from home, he is there, right?
Absolutely,
because
every day.
You showed me a picture just a few minutes ago that he's now at the daycare center, right?
He is. Today he's at the daycare, but typically he's with me. He goes with me to most business meetings, to events, networking events. There's a backstory why, but typically when you have a dog that you need to bring everywhere with you is because you need an emotional support, right? But I feel like I'm the human emotional support to my dog. He does not stay home alone very well.
Yeah.
So that's the solution we found, is that he comes with me everywhere.
That's great. That's great. I think it's a mutual beneficial. Right?
Absolutely.
Right. Hey, and when you say you're living now here for a decade,
yeah.
How do you experience living in the Netherlands?
I love it. I really found home in the Netherlands, I have to say. Initially when I moved, over a decade ago, like I said, I never thought I would stay here that long. It's one of those stories when you go, 2-3 years, time will tell. Time did tell. I'm still here. And I really found my place, I think. Especially in Amsterdam, where I find a community that is very, on both sides, I would say, open and inspiring, but also super international. Mm-hmm. The Netherlands is my home.
Oh, that's great. That's great to hear. And we met each other at, I think the first time was at the DNNL network event at the 17th of January, out of my head.
Yeah.
Friday in Rabobank.
Yes,
Rotterdam.
that was it. Yeah.
Was it Rotterdam? No?
Rotterdam.
Yeah, it was Rotterdam, yeah. And that was, I think... I was the one who saw you coming, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that was funny. Hey, and what was the purpose of you being there?
Yeah. So the Dutch New Narrative Lab event is one of the events that I attended indeed earlier this year. First of all, because of the lineup of speakers, I was very much drawn by who was there. But also the whole mission behind that forum, which is, of course, around bringing out also the less represented in business and in society voices, entrepreneurs with bicultural backgrounds, stories of people who I find particularly interesting, obviously, from my line of work as an interculturalist and a person who works with diversity, equity, and inclusion topics. So my short answer is the event itself.
The event itself, right? And you are you said a interculturalist, right?
Yes.
All right, great. And is that your passion or your profession?
It's my passion and profession. So I am one of those lucky ones, I guess, who gets to live that passion in my everyday work. It hasn't always been that way, but it's definitely where my professional journey brought me, both through my experience as I grew my career from a local business unit to international organizations, global functions in corporate, where I worked with over 80 nationalities on the floor, so to say, among colleagues, and then every interaction with colleagues in the local business units was obviously across the world, and that really tapped into my interest for cultures and differences and how people differently approach work and life. It is my passion and my profession now.
Yeah. It's palpable. You see it. There's something happening. If you're talking about it, it's intrinsic motivation, and we are going to deep dive in where that come from. And of course, in my introduction, but it's only on surface level where I state is the introduction about Indigo. But let's dive deep into Indigo and how you turned your passion into your profession.
Thank you. It is, it is my labor of love, if you like. I started Indigo just under 2 years ago, having left my corporate life behind, and decided to become an independent trainer and facilitator. Indigo Diversity Consulting is indeed my venture, where I provide the trainings and bespoke learning programs in intercultural communication and diversity competence. But Indigo itself, we had a little conversation prior to the recording about the name and my love for indigo as the dye, as the color itself, which is in itself a fascinating intercultural phenomenon. Indigo in the 17th, 18th century was valued more than gold. It was actually the dye that people traded in. And of course, it has a big connection to also quite dark parts of history, where it comes to colonialism and exploitation. It kind of binds very different lands and cultures historically. As a name, I thought it was a very interesting.
It is, but it's also a combination. There's a combination in the name.
Absolutely.
And what is the combination?
Well, for inclusion or inclusive, and D for diversity. So you have indigo. We laughed that it should be it's actionable, right? It should be actionable with go. So we have indigo,
go.
Inclusive diversity go, which hopefully also makes it easier to remember. But indeed, in the name itself, of course, the indications of what that venture is all about.
Yeah. And can you share a little bit more about the programs you're running?
Very happy to. So my offering really centers around multicultural or intercultural teams and leaders. So those organizations that have talent coming from diverse cultural backgrounds. And it is all centered around building the competencies to become a well-functioning and a productive team. Because we know, obviously, studies tell us that there is a huge advantage of having diversity in your team when it comes to diversity of perspectives, diversity of ideas, different experiences that can enrich decision-making, innovation, and everything which comes with it. But it's also important to acknowledge that it is actually quite a skill to be able to effectively lead and function in teams that are comprised of people from diverse backgrounds. And it comes with a certain competency building.
And you mentioned the word acknowledgement. Acknowledgement, that triggers me, because what is the moment a new client who doesn't know you reach out to you? How does that work? Because then you have to already acknowledge that there is somewhere a gap or a challenge or maybe a problem. So that's the first thing. Hey, we don't have a problem. Everything is in place. We have policies, we have this, we have that. And what is normally the state of mind maybe of the person who's reaching out, and who is that then? Typically, the teams that I work with already have experienced some sort of pain in that instance. When it comes to a potential, misunderstandings or frustrations, or that kind of underlying sense of what is happening here. I'm not really sure, how are we taking decisions? Why are we taking decisions that way? And the more, I would say, aware the leadership is about the kind of typical, I would say, phases of team forming, right? We have the forming, we have always the storming, and then only then the team actually starts functioning as a team. In an intercultural team, that first phase can be actually quite bumpy because we don't have the same sets of norms and beliefs and kind of what is normal and accepted here can vary between the team members. So it takes additional skill and competency to be able to guide that effectively. There's also studies which show that between homogeneous teams, they might be kind of getting to that point of norming quicker, but they will plateau
later on.
Yeah.
And it comes to productivity, whereas intercultural teams might take a little bit more effort to get them going. But once you get them going, the productivity and innovation goes through the roof. So this is, I guess, my short answer to your question is when the teams realize that they could do better, that the productivity could be higher, that they could learn to appreciate the different perspectives a bit more, is where typically I meet them and we build a bespoke learning program that addresses the particular, I would say, constellation of intercultural talent that they have.
Yeah, and I can imagine that, is there a sort of average question which reach you? So help us with this, or how do we recognize when we have that kind of problem?
Yeah. Well, typically
recognize and acknowledge and reaching out.
Yeah, thank you. No, typically it's these are struggles around communication, for example. So teams realize that they have challenges in understanding each other, in keeping to deadlines, in meeting, I would say, project deliverables that people from different cultural contexts need to be involved in. Be that either in the team themselves, there is a big diversity, or they work with partners or clients or deliver projects for someone in a different cultural context. Communication is the easiest one to spot because obviously we all know very well the kind of main differences in communication styles between direct communication styles and the more indirect or higher context style where people might not understand each other, right? Mm-hmm. They might miss certain signals. They might not be able to read between the lines if you're coming from a cultural context which is much more direct and kind of spelled directly. And
how long is always with a beginning and an end, or is it also that you are being involved for 6 months in a row? Or?
Well, the programs vary. So, of course, I would say the easiest first step is a set of, I would say, introductory awareness building workshops or some sort of introduction to the topic of building a bit of a common language to be able to address, right, what is actually happening in this team, what might be the issues, and how can we actually look at culture as one of the lenses which informs the team dynamic. But of course, in an ideal scenario, you have a number of interventions over the period of time where you can work with the team.
And if there is... Well, we will share your company and in the show notes. But are there also some pre-work customers can do, or reading work, or whatever that? Yeah. When are they ready to? Because there is something in. Are we ready to acknowledge and also to receive help in this area? So what can help them?
Absolutely. I mean, there's of course numerous resources out there in terms of books or I would say sources of information related to intercultural business and different aspects of it. One of the, I would say, most commonly known and quite, I would say, readily available in bookstores is Erin Meyer's book, Culture Map, which often is referred to as the Yellow Book, just because of the cover color that it has. It is a good introduction to the topic. The topic is obviously much broader and I would say more nuanced than the comparison on the kind of national culture level. I like to look at culture as a much more dynamic aspect than a fixed descriptor of Polish culture versus Dutch culture.
No, of course.
So there's more to tell about that. But when it comes to psychological safety in intercultural teams, in the teams that are comprised of talent from different cultural backgrounds, there's plenty to research. I'm also, of course, happy to link some resources to the episode notes. I've recently developed a short ebook.
Yes, I read something about it, so that would be great. Can we share that to the
Absolutely, I will be happy to give my details, and if anyone is interested to receive it, it's a 20+ page ebook. a kind of short toolkit to psychological safety in intercultural teams for leaders specifically.
And in my research, I found that you are having over 18 years of international marketing and communications experience in large multinationals. Sounds very interesting, but also very safe when it comes to the financials, right?
Yeah.
And why choose the path of entrepreneurship?
Well, that's a big question. Yes, indeed, my professional journey started in big corporates. So after university, I started working in multiple different roles in marketing and strategy. First in pharmaceutical companies. That brought me to, broadly speaking, a healthcare marketing segment. It's quite different from fast-moving goods marketing, of course, because it relates to actually working a lot with content that it's medical healthcare professionals, patients' organizations, a very, very specific type of marketing. And it drew me in. It drew me in because of the purpose that was behind it, and really related to health. And
so this normally never happens, but I had to put the recording on pause because they were outside the building. They were removing a sort of steel cable with a lot of force, and of course, exactly at the timing when we are having our conversation. So, but we were talking about the movement from a safe, financially safe, stable job as an international marketeer from large multinationals to your entrepreneurial journey. And the big question is why?
Well, first of all, yes, I started my career, like I said, in big international companies, and worked for nearly 2 decades in both local and global roles in pharma and in healthcare. I would like to challenge one statement that you made in your question, which is assumed safety and assumed assumed feeling. I would say it's quite a
I said financial stability and
stability,
because safe space is a different. This is the different
safe space,
topic.
but also the fact that that employment is safe. That's also, I would say, we try to feed ourselves that feeling more than it is actually true, with a little bit, of course, of a wing here. But I did work for many years in business, and that's where I've really observed, especially in my global roles, like I've started sharing that so little time and effort is put into actually equipping people with tools and the competency to lead international teams. We're all kind of thrown into that environment thinking, okay, it's you speak English, swim.
Yeah.
I remember my first couple of months when I moved from a local business unit to that ultra diverse, multi-diverse environment of a global headquarters here in the Netherlands, where I really didn't know what hit me. I really felt for the first couple of months completely out of my breath with what is expected of me, what are the norms here, what is actually expected. Because every interaction and every single feedback, if you like, or immediate reaction was played according to different rules. And I really wish back then someone would have actually given me the language and the tools to navigate that better. So to answer your question directly about that shift, years and years later, I've worked here in the Netherlands for nearly 10 years at a big international company in that marketing and strategy role for a very specific type of, I would say, portfolio in medical nutrition, healthcare nutrition, for quite a niche group of patients. We're talking about orphan disorders. So imagine you have 300 patients with a particular disorder in the Netherlands. right? That's the kind of scale of that. And of course, with such a small or rare conditions comes a lot of challenges when it comes to access to treatment. Well, first of all, actually recognition and diagnosis, then access to treatment. And the company I worked for many years was one of the only providers of solutions for those patients. So I always, for many, many years, I felt very, I would say, emotionally engaged and also responsible for running that business in the right way, for, having the offering. We've had a lot of connections with patients' organizations, with healthcare professionals. It was a lot of sponsorship involved when effectively the organizations we worked for could function because of the funds we were able to support. So to me, this is the red thread which always drove me towards the underrepresented, towards what's kind of on the margins, what's not the mainstream. And this is how it showed itself in my work, and why I stayed so long. Why I stayed so long engaged in that topic. And when I stepped into diversity, equity, and inclusion work in parallel, still on the corporate side, it became kind of a natural progression. So although on the outside it might not look like it, for me it makes a lot of sense. It's about having even more impact in helping to bring out the less often heard narratives, to make room and to create spaces where they can be heard and acknowledged.
Well, this brings it more and more together, right?
Yeah.
So your professional journey, but also there is a purpose behind it. And it's as if time helped you calibrate it more and more. Maybe to put it right. And that makes me curious, and I would love to share also to the audience, where does that come from?
That's an interesting reflection. I think that, well, like in many things, right? They are probably connected to our bringing to the sensitivities that we were kind of brought up to have because of our experiences. And I reflected on that when I first started Indigo, when I decided to leave, corporate and started, okay, what is this drive? Why am I having this drive to actually do it now on my own, independently, and continue taking all those risks? But actually, what is driving me? And I think part of it is my activist gene, if you like. I like to blame my dad for that.
Too easy. This is too easy.
He is. He's always been a very active socially, I would say, in a civic society person. And I kind of grew up in a house where that attitude of care and actually being interested with, in what's happening around you is very prevalent. That was also my interest in social sciences and how I ended up actually studying applied social sciences and sociology. So one is, I think, that sensitivity to understanding human behavior, to understanding social dynamics, to be aware that there are people who might have systemically less access to certain resources than others. And secondly, I think just my own story, growing up in Eastern Europe, the brink of the fall of the Berlin Wall, that kind of gives you away my age, but, for those who can do the math. I grew up in the 80s and 90s in Poland, which was literally going through the biggest transformation that any generation can even remember when it comes to political system, but also economical system, right? From communism to the open market, where opportunities became available to people, but a lot of people could not take advantage of those opportunities immediately. And when I moved years later abroad, that was also the first time when I started experiencing that cultural bias around, Eastern European background, of course, is associated very often in the West with lower educated people, with people who, who work as seasonal workers. The typical comment I always get when I say I'm from Poland is like, oh, great, my cleaner is from Poland, or oh, great, my plumber is from Poland, which I am very happy to hear that there is a positive association. But that's exactly where, you start realizing there's a lot of tension. And another one of those kind of microaggressions, culturally, understood biases, comes from the language perspective. Oh, you speak English so well.
Oh, wow.
And so...
This resonates.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. This.
Tell me.
Sorry. When I was younger, this brings me back to my own childhood.
Yeah.
People were really surprised that my Dutch is typical Dutch, where I grew up. It's quite privileged surroundings where I grew up, and it was a little bit posh Dutch.
Yeah.
And some people were like, "Wow, you really can speak Dutch very well." Eh? And I was always taken aback and surprised. I was like, "Huh? I was 6 months old, but and can you still speak English? Can you still speak Indian?" I was 6 months old. What were your first words when you were 6 months old and growing up in the Netherlands? Then I guess the same. But this was resonating because I was like, you really are good in Dutch, eh?
Yeah.
And I was like,
Yeah, I mean, thank you for sharing this, because this is, again, it's one of those moments where you catch yourself, being in a situation which is a consequence of people having a certain assumption or building, coming from a certain bias, which is a cultural bias, right? You look a certain way, therefore you belong to a certain box, therefore when you somehow don't fit that box, you're confusing me, right?
Yeah.
You have a little bit of that reaction. So these experiences, I think, all build up to me realizing how much more we can do. We can do in terms of changing, we need to do in terms of attitude shifts and, trying to move people away from that attitude of othering to humanizing others.
Yeah, right? You mentioned it in the pre-conversation. Humanizing otherness. That's beautiful.
Yeah, that's really what drives me in my work. Is even if I can have the smallest of dents in how people look at one another, how much more open or curious they are about learning of that different perspective, that different life experience, that is a win, right? That is already a win. And I always say, whenever I leave a room or a team where I see that magic happening, right? People are starting to have those aha moments when they go like, oh, I had no idea, or finally this makes sense, right? That now I know that this isn't personal, that this actually has, there is a logic behind your behavior that is just so alien to me, but tell me more. That is the most beautiful gift that I can receive.
Spark of curiosity and openness and different perspectives, other perspectives.
Yeah.
What is the biggest challenge you are facing in your work when it comes to what you're doing? What is the biggest challenge?
Well, there's of course, nowadays, needless to say, the whole context around diversity, equity, inclusion became so politicized. So we know that that there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to companies' policies or how they want to reshape or I would say adjust their plans when it comes to learning and development in that area. So that's, I would say, the macro level of what's happening around diversity, equity, inclusion as such. What I find actually specifically the intercultural field or the cultural diversity angle gives, and it's less of a challenge but more of an enabler in that sense, it's an easier, or I would say less confronting way of talking about diversity. Everyone has a cultural background.
Everybody.
Right? It's I would say the most democratic diversity that we can think of in that sense, right? And having those conversations about, okay, how do you experience time? How do you prefer to communicate? What is the right way for you to be addressed? Do you thrive more in a hierarchical or more egalitarian leadership settings? Right, those conversations really open people's eyes to those unspoken norms and values that drive human behavior. And then the conversation about diversity becomes much easier, because then we, of course, can overlay the gender topic over it. Yeah, the way women are being socialized versus men being socialized, very different. If you, I would say, look at the intersection of that with culture, that's a whole different aspect, right? So when it comes to challenges, I would say the general context of DEI, and secondly, on a kind of more, I would say, closer to home level, I think the biggest challenge I see is teams understanding, or leaders understanding, that this is a business driver. So this isn't a skill that it's, out there of the soft skills, right? Yeah. But this really has a very direct impact in how well you do in business. Right?
Why is that?
How your team communicates, as in, is there friction? Are they able to agree on timelines and actually stick to those timelines, because everyone actually understands what is being said in commitments? How people feel in that team, right? Do they feel a sense of belonging, or do they feel continuously, because of those micro situations, like they are being the outsider, or somehow something does not work? And that psychological safety we talked about, which allows them to actually bring up issues, be able to feel safe enough to say when something is not right. All of those aspects, of course, contribute then to your success, right? To your actual business deliverables. And I find that may be a little frustrating, that it takes so much effort to convince people to see that as such.
That's interesting to see that, because I think one of the biggest challenges is also that it's about empathy, and it's about compassion. It's about how are we able to show people the other side. Yeah. And that's where a friend of mine is a founder of Enliven Empathy. Yeah. And know him very well. What I really love is that it puts you in the place of the other.
Absolutely.
So, for instance, one it's a VR technology, and he's a gamer, and it all started with gaming, and then VR technology, but also when it comes to domestic violence, put yourself in the place of the parent, and you are now the 11-year-old, and you get shouted at, and from above, right? Yeah. From a big grown-up standing in front of you, and visualize it through VR technology on your so you can put yourself in the shoes of the other. Yeah. And that's one of the biggest challenges, I guess, is like, okay, but I don't recognize it. It isn't there, and that's why I love to be more and more involved in the world of D&I, is because I never knew before I met Sasha. My dear sister in crime. Before that, I wasn't aware of a lot of sort of microaggression or whatever. I wasn't aware of it, and then all of a sudden I became more and more involved in on events, hearing people speak about their experiences, and I was like, hey. This resonates, but also what you just mentioned, you saw it was spontaneous. I was right away, hey, this resonates, because I got multiple times asked, hey, but you're really good in your Dutch, and you speak really posh Dutch, and it was like, huh? So helping people to
to
see it from the other side, from the the perspective of the other,
and valuing it. Funny, I mean, you mentioning Enlive and Empathy. I actually work with them as one of the facilitators. So I keep nodding because I know the programs very well.
Yeah,
not the one about domestic violence, because obviously that's relevant in a business setting, but gender equity related one, or cultural stereotypes and biases. Absolutely. I mean, the power of being able to put people through an experience which they normally would have never been able to go through, right, is enormous. And it is much... So once you get in front of the team, be that talking about cultural diversity or gender topics, of course, there's a lot we can do in terms of, talking about case studies, bringing people into storytelling, or using virtual reality like you've just described. To me, the challenge is the step before, is for them to actually acknowledge that this is something they should be paying attention to. Mm-hmm. And luckily, of course, that is shifting, and a lot of organizations and teams are moving in that direction. But yeah, that's, I would say, my answer to the question about the biggest challenge.
Yeah, and of course, this is about your work, what you're doing, and but for me, I'm very interested in your personal journey also, and I'm sure the listener, of course, and its journeys of empowerment. So luckily, it is within the scope of our podcast. What makes me curious is growing up in Poland, having a father, and you just mentioned it, quite an activist, or there is a rebellious activism in you. Yeah. But what planted the seed for your curiosity in the world of D&I, or different perspectives, of other perspectives, of opening up? Is there a certain moment, specific moment in time, which planted the seed?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Maybe a little bit about my background in that journey. I'm happy to share. It might make more sense if I start at the beginning. So indeed, I mentioned, I was born and raised in Poland. In the 80s and 90s, this huge kind of transformation that happened in Eastern Europe. But I think, despite the fact I was born in the city, to a family of parents, both with higher education, that part of the world specifically, and I mean Poland back then, has been in quite a specific economic situation. So we never had a lot. We always had enough, but it hasn't been. Yeah. It hasn't been. I would say an upbringing of upper class city family. I grew up in the 48 square meter apartment. 4 people. So I have one sibling, my younger brother. My first time I traveled abroad was when I was 17. And that was a very exotic country of Czech Republic, right across the border. Yeah. So that kind of gives you, the idea of how diverse my upbringing was, which it wasn't at all. It was a very homogeneous, very white, very Christian or Catholic environment that I grew up in. Yet I was always, and maybe because of that, I was always curious about other places. I always wanted to see different cultures. I would watch documentaries and films about places that, I had absolutely no access to. My first dream, I don't know if I've actually shared that with you.
No. Please do.
When I wanted to become, when I grew up, I wanted to be an archaeologist. I wanted to be archaeologist working in Egypt specifically. I don't know why Egypt. Maybe there was there was a documentary that I saw, but I remember very vividly dreaming of learning. And I've read hundreds of books about ancient Egypt and the cultural cultural aspects of it and beliefs. So I've had that drive for something that isn't the mainstream, in essence, isn't accessible to me for many, many years. And then the more I started learning, of course, at school also about history, Poland has quite a difficult history, especially in the 20th century, from non-state to becoming a state, then to having a very multicultural society, and after the Second World War, That's changing quite rapidly, of course, and shifting with the huge loss to the Jewish population of Poland. Half of all the Holocaust victims are actually were Jewish victims who lived in a back then territory of Poland. So that became an interest to me, as in like, why are we not talking about this? Why are we not knowing that much about the culture that has been part of the society for so long? And many others, because we became a very, I would say, homogeneous and Catholic dominant culture as the result of all those political shifts and also border changes. There is one particular memory I do have that now you triggered me with the question of when did it start? And I think this is, again, probably because I've already had a sensitivity to interest in the topic. I remember sitting down with my grandma in her apartment back then, so my mom's mother, and we were looking through like old family memorabilia, like, photos of my great-grandparents and some notebooks. And she takes out those recipe books by my great-grandmother. Like 1932, 1937, and I was like, holy, this is old, right? Like, before the war, it was like, it was totally mind-blowing. But they were handwritten recipes by my great-grandmother. And then on the side of the notebook with like a pencil, she wrote, "Give back 5 zloty to the Jewish girl downstairs." And I have that, it's like a photo, like a photo in my memory. I just completely froze, and I was like, "Oh, but how? Who is that girl?" I was 15 at the time. I've started asking a lot of quite difficult questions, obviously, because there was not really answers to that. I mean, who knows what happened to that family, right? Where are they? It was, I think, 1935 that note was taken. And from that point, I remember I got very interested in learning about other cultures that were part of that society for so long. We had Muslim Tatars in the East, who also, throughout the, I would say, historical reasons, which we don't have to go into a history lesson here, got marginalized. And in the end, now I think there's 300 people, community living in Poland. So this was kind of the beginning of me learning that there is much more depth and diversity to history of this country than on my environment than what I knew initially. And then I started traveling much more when I could. When I was, I would say, big enough, I started volunteering in international volunteering service programs. As soon as Poland started applying to become a European Union member, opportunities for youth became accessible. So I could become a leader of international volunteering service programs.
Focused on specifically on what?
Focused on some cultural programs, but also environmental programs. For me, it was a way of getting out, meeting people, speaking English, practicing my English.
Broaden your perspective.
But going and meeting people who live and come from different places, and the rest is history.
And then it's one of your drivers. What we can take out of it is your curiosity.
Absolutely.
You're really driven by curiosity, asking a lot of questions to the surroundings and not finding the answer, and then really got dissatisfied and then looking for the answers. And let's go a little bit forward to the transition from, because I think we missed something, the transition from, let's say, the corporate world or the multinational world into the, was it a natural flow or not? Because was there a sort of nudge or what helped you to enter that stage?
Fast forward many years from where we just left off. Like we've talked earlier, I worked in corporate for many years. Moved to the Netherlands with work. I would say my job brought me here to the headquarters of the company I worked for. continued working here, stepped into diversity, equity, and inclusion work as soon as that became the term. Yeah. I was quite, I would say, early adopter in a sense that I became a DEI champion. Kind of a bottom-up movement within the organization, internal trainer for topics of unconscious bias, microaggressions, but also intercultural diversity. Yeah. We had a full program in the company that I worked for that I'm actually now also back involved with as an independent trainer. That's just a side note. Funny how universe works in mysterious ways. But yeah, that transition then... I wanted to grow in DI. I really wanted to. I felt this was my space, and I wanted to kind of move away from my marketing role, which, like I said, I've held for many years. So I was doing double job. Yeah. And as it turns out, it's not a very good idea to have two jobs at the same time.
Why not? Why is that?
I ended up with quite a bad burnout. I crashed in February 2022.
Just post-pandemic, right?
Just post-pandemic, exactly. Which I think is also not an atypical story in the sense that a lot of people who I've then spoken to since have had either... they've literally just kind of pushed through the pandemic and then crashed or didn't even make it through. For me, there were multiple reasons. I think, again, in hindsight, I can talk about it, of course, in a different perspective. One, there was a huge pressure internally in the organization, a lot of movement, a lot of reorganizations, like in a lot of companies at the time, which because it was happening everywhere, you also kind of take it as the reality, right? It's nothing that you pay attention to too much because it's happening everywhere. I mean, nothing you can do, but it does affect you in many ways. I wasn't the one affected directly, but then if your whole environment changes, of course, 3 times
indirectly,
in 2 years,
you are affected, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And secondly, progressively, I saw also that as I grew and as certain values became much more important for me, it became less and less of my place. I wanted to be much more engaged indeed in the diversity, equity, and inclusion topics. I wanted to drive that part of my expertise, but also there was just as much as you could do within the organization. And that led me to burnout. That led me to probably the most difficult 10 months or 12 months of my life, which was then the recovery after I was off work. And for someone, who spent 2 decades in high pressure, kind of, go for it, work environment, that was a big setback.
I can imagine. And what was the moment that you recognized that there... because is that a vivid moment, or is it a process? How does it work?
Yeah, I think it's a process. I mean, it's one of those I think things that keeps creeping up on you, like drips, and then at some point you go like, oh, I'm too late. And I felt a lot of I would say pre-signals. And again, in a hindsight, you can interpret them as such, but you don't just wake up one day with burnout, right?
No.
It's a process that
it's a sneaky bastard.
Exactly, it's quite a long process, and I think the hardest part is that I saw that happening around me through multiple quite close colleagues of mine, but you're kind of in a denial. You're like, it's not going to happen to me. I know I'm taking good care of myself, but that's what you tell yourself, and you keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And it's not necessarily, in my case, an overworking, because I think often we understand burnout as, there was too much on my plate. There was a lot on my plate, but it wasn't significantly more than it was ever before. I think it was that misalignment in values, as in that I felt increasingly that what I can do and what I am doing here is not what I wish what I know I could be doing and what I wish to do. And that eats at you at a much quicker pace.
Yeah, and without knowing for a long time, and then all of a sudden it's
Yeah.
a big bang, and it's like,
Yeah. And just at some point your body basically says no more. Your emotional body and your physical body basically says, we've had it. Now we're taking a break. And then it's not much you can do. For me, it happened quite rapidly. I remember that day when I called into a team meeting with a team colleague 1-to-1. And, before we could even, start with how are you, I just broke down in tears and I could not stop. It was just a system shut down, basically. To which, I went then the same day to the huisarts, so the GP.
Yeah.
Spent another 45 minutes crying uncontrollably, and it was obvious that it's just your system is so overheated that that's it.
In hindsight, where it's always easier in hindsight to let's go back to 5 years younger you. What is the advice you can give your 5 year younger you when it comes to this dark period in your life? What we a single piece of advice? What can we learn from it?
Don't ignore your nudges. So those moments where you feel this doesn't feel right. I don't want, this. I need to pivot or I need to shift. Basically, following your heart and your intuition is what I wish I would have done earlier. Mm-hmm. And it's easier said than done. And I totally acknowledge that maybe, in my case, I had to go through that experience to learn the lesson. I also believe, there is a value in tough experiences. I read this very helpful book that actually helped me through burnout, which was called The Joy of Burnout.
The Joy of Burnout. We should put that in the show notes. The Joy of Burnout.
The Joy of Burnout
is an interesting title.
Absolutely. And it's a perspective which basically tells you, indeed, that, which means every experience is only worth as much as you take out of it. And that burnout experience for me has really been one of the most transformative moments that I could reevaluate. What do I stand for? What do I want? Where do I actually want to put my talent towards? And kind of reshape it. So that decision to go, start Indigo and work independently was a consequence of that process, rather than, okay, now what? It actually came quite, I would say, organically as the result of that inner work that went into it. And had that not happened, I probably would have not had that courage or opportunity to do so.
It sounds beautiful. Thanks for sharing, first of all. But it sounds almost as if it had to happen, as if it's almost a gift that it happened.
I look
Am
at
I
it.
right?
I look at it like
it's powerful to see it and to feel it and to like it. And luckily, it did. How did the book came on your path? Did it fall in your lap? So how does it?
Actually, that's an interesting one. I mentioned a couple of colleagues or people in my surrounding who went through that experience earlier, and that book was recommended to me by someone who indeed had a burnout experience a couple of months earlier, or was, I'd say, further down the line on the recovery journey. And I always, find it so powerful in any circumstance, of any hardship. But if you're going through something tough, community and people who have gone through something similar, of course, are the best source of help and support.
That's very important part what you mentioned, community.
Yeah.
I can remember that I did the trauma stress, the trauma stress studies, and one of the things Bessel van der Kolk is very famous of is trauma is not only about what happened to you, but also which was so heavy that you couldn't cope at the moment, but also who was there for you. And this is very important, that we share and that there's a community, and I think that's really important in everything what we do. Community is important, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And so it's interesting. It's also says a lot about you, that you can turn a dark period like a sort of, that you see see it as a gift. I think it's a superpower.
Oh, thank you. I choose to do so. I think it helps me also make sense out of course, what happened, but also I tend to believe that. Well, like I said just a few minutes ago, every experience, however tough or I would say joyful, is only as much worth as worth as much as you take out of it, as you really carry on with you after. And to me, it broke me down. It really put me down to the ground. The first few weeks, a few months of burnout are really very confronting, because your body basically says no. You can have, maximum 4 hours of any activity, and that includes walking down the street to the grocery store. Like that's.
And then you're exhausted. And
you're completely exhausted. You can't read. It's a mess. To then coming out and deciding, okay, I'm actually closing a chapter of everything I know in my professional life to date, which was, big international companies, corporate, I would say, setting, and taking my toys and doing it anyway elsewhere, right? Which is what I did.
Yeah, and I've asked you already the question, 5 years. What would your single best advice for yourself? What would it be? But also prevention-wise, because if it happens once,
it can always.
It always can happen. So what helps? What helps you to stay aware, maybe, of and stay aligned with who you are and what for you is important? What helps you?
Yeah, that's a very important point, and thanks for bringing it up, because, of course, again, for me, I think the way I am structuring my life and my workload and what I actually put my energy in now that I have, I feel full control over it, right? In the end, I choose to a large extent how much time and how much effort I put into the projects I engaged with. That was the biggest learning, is to manage my energy levels and to manage also to listen to those, like I said, those nudges which say this doesn't feel right, this doesn't sound right, or there's something in that interaction in that project that just, I don't know what it is, but it's enough for me to say, okay, that's not good for me. And to start listening to that voice, and so not put yourself in situations in which you are then doing something because you feel kind of cornered. That's kind of a bigger part of my self-care now, plus maybe the more obvious but very often undervalued pieces around rest, giving yourself permission to rest.
Giving yourself permission. This is a biggie. Giving yourself permission.
I've always had, a feeling of every minute needs to be super productive. I cannot stop, right? I mean, there's an hour between the meetings. I could, fit in that and that. And in that kind of hustle culture of more and more and more, you lose you lose also the contact with yourself. Like you lose that feeling of how much is enough.
And what helps you to recenter or to stay true?
In my practical practice, I mean, I'm a yogi. I do a lot of yoga, and I have my regular meditation practice, breath work. A lot of good came to me through my recovery period, where I actually took some somatic healing therapy. Yeah. Beautiful. Because then you start really learning to decipher when your body starts sending you those signals. One which just recently actually came to me. You know what happens when I start getting stressed out?
No.
That's an interesting one. Like when I don't feel my body's under pressure, like there's a tension in the meeting or something, I start yawning. Yawning, like really yawning. My system starts self-regulating by yawning. My brain needs more oxygen because I'm under stress. And now I've connected it that this is my stress reaction. It's unbelievable what it does.
So you became aware of the unaware.
Right? Yeah. You start recognizing how your body is communicating to you that something is off.
Sounds as a very important finding. Yeah. Yet, what do you do at the moment that you feel that it is happening?
Well, then I can put something in place. Either build in some time right after to decompress, to have more space for myself. To even acknowledge, okay, yeah, this was tough, or this was stressful, rather than just push on to the next thing and then build on that additional sets of inputs and just kind of ignore the symptoms you have or the signals you have coming from your body. I mean, our bodies are incredibly smart.
The body keeps the score.
Absolutely. No, I mean
it says a lot. Yeah. Hey, you curious you. Before we're heading towards the end of this conversation, you also mentioned something which I'm very curious about, and I would love to share also to the broader audience, is speak your truth.
Oh, yes.
I would love to invite you to share whatever you want to share about that, and what helped you, how did it came on your path? What is it? And
yeah. Oh, nice. When we started talking in our let's say preparation for today's conversation, I mentioned that it's quite incredible how at the same time or in a similar time frame, a lot of opportunities for me to share my story started emerging. To share my story is to talk about my journey, beyond just the work. And one of those opportunities added in today's conversation is indeed the program that I mentioned, Speak Your Truth. That is a public speaking program for people who want to tap into the power of their truth in their storytelling. It's run by Mark van der Heideren. He's also a very good public speaker himself, a community builder behind the Conscious 500 community. I had a pleasure meeting him in person a couple of months ago, and when we started talking about the program, I felt immediately I need this. I need to be in a community, guided community, in finding the way to express my truth. And I think today's conversation already looks different because I'm part of that program.
How did it came on your path?
How did it came to my path? I've met Mark, so the brain behind it, during... in February, during my stay in Portugal, I was spending February and mid-March working remotely from Portugal. And we met there, we talked about the program, we talked about his work, and I felt immediately this is something I want to do. Part of my offering as well, apart from the courses and the bespoke learning program, so I talked about, is also speaking, so keynote talks around topics of diversity, specifically cultural diversity. So yeah, it became just a very good match for that.
And is it possible for you to answer the question, why now?
I thought about it. I thought when you asked me to join the podcast, and then Speak Your Truth came onto my path, I think it's one of those, or I feel it's one of those synchronicities that propel you, those couple of steps further. So had you asked me a year ago, or 2 years ago, I probably would have said no.
No.
Or maybe, well, I don't know, but maybe I would have definitely had to prepare myself for that conversation very differently. I think I've done a lot of my self-reflection. I'm kind of integrating my journey much better now. And I think it's about having a storytelling about your journey that helps you take next steps. So why now? Maybe that story becomes clearer and clearer in my mind.
Beautiful. And I think there's one important word you mentioned, and that is integrating. It is integrating all parts of us and bring it together and share it. And that's what I love to, do in the podcast is of Journeys of Empowerment. Of course, it's important what we do and how we do things. And normally when you ask somebody, hey, who are you? You get the what and the how, right? Yes. And it's no offense. I do that the same. Yeah. And now I'm now putting together my website. And the first page is a homepage. And the homepage is business focused. So it's also business focused Michiel. But there is the second page is about the impact. And it starts with a very personal story about myself. And to be honest, that's much more who I am. But I kept it always a little under the surface, and it was like, why should we share? So integrating, I think that's a very powerful word, because you're integrating the whole journey of who you are and bring it together in what you're doing right now. Is what you're doing right now, is it also... what you are doing, is that more aligned with why are you doing what you're doing?
Absolutely. And I mean, just the way you explained it opened my eyes also to an insight to say, of course, that story needs to be integrated for me. I mean, I am all about creating spaces where people's stories and experience can be expressed. So if I don't do it myself, then I'm not walking the talk of what I'm inviting people to do. And for me, it is, and it is about being able to own your full self and to say, this is me, right? This is my pretty sides. This is my shadow sides, or the sides that, I've overcome or that were challenging for me. But I am here in front of you today, as, we started a conversation with, because of all those things that happened, and thanks to all those things that happened, and those things that brought me here. And, being a long-term immigrant, working and living in a country that is so diverse culturally on one hand, but at the same time also has its own challenges, of course, with its own history and the dynamics in a wider context of what's happening, in the Western world nowadays. All of that shapes you only as much as the experiences that you can bring into it and make sense out of.
Well, with your curiosity, it brings a lot. I can imagine. And if there is one thing you would love to have people taken away of our conversation, what would that be?
I think, that is my call for my work, and I think today's conversation is even more so on that theme of inviting openness and curiosity. Being curious. I mean, I love how curious you are about your guests and the depth of questions that you ask. I really enjoyed that conversation. And I think it's beautiful when we can find time and space and feel safe enough to share, to actually bring our full selves into the conversation. And I would love to see more and more workplaces where that safety is there. And I'm not naive enough to think, we will everywhere bring every single aspect of us. But to be able to feel safe enough to do your best job, to not to have to hide any parts of yourself, to not to have to pretend that you are someone you are not, is really my invitation for leaders and for people who actually are in places of power to change that.
Nothing to add there. Wow. If people want to reach out, where can they find you? Of course, we will share it in the notes, but where can they find it? Where can they find you?
LinkedIn typically is my, I would say, go-to contact. So Magdalena Szumna on LinkedIn. IndigoDiversity.com is the website for Indigo. There is of course email or any other means of communication. So very happy to have that shared under the notes.
And before we go, there was one mention in the podcast some minutes ago about the ebook on psychological safety, the 20 pages you put together. If people are curious about that, can they reach out via LinkedIn? What do you prefer?
LinkedIn or email. We can also, again, leave an email, which is magdalena@indigodiversity.com. We can put it in the notes.
All right, okay. That we will share in the show notes. And the book. The book, what was the name?
The Joy of Burnout.
The Joy of Burnout. I love that title. Magdalena, thank you so much for your openness and for being here and for being you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, and one more thing. Ever walked out of a workshop thinking, what was the point of that? That's exactly what No More Boring Workshops is here to change for good. Created by Dorrit Roest and Mieke Jansen of the Strategy Sprint Academy and Agency, it's not just another course. It's a powerful formula to bring clarity, energy and real outcomes back into the room. If you believe workshops should spark action, not just more talking, you want to check it out. All the info is at strategysprint.company/No More Boring Workshops. And you'll find also the link in the bio.